All right. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We are joined by a colleague of mine, Neil Strachan, and one of our customers, Jim Goodman. And today we're going to have a little bit of a chat about Jim, what Jim does, and also a little bit about security as a general topic, security in IoT, and the options for improving security overall, and the potential benefits that it has in terms of user experience, your staff, customers, colleagues, whatever that may be. So without further ado, I'm going to let the guys introduce themselves, and then we can get into some of the conversation. So first off, I'll hand over to Neil. Neil, if you wanted to introduce yourself, that would be great.
So hi everybody, I'm Neil Strachan, the head of product for Pelion. So I have a career in helping customers connect their IoT devices to their applications. I've worked very much in the European basis, but with North American customers as well. I really help our customers understand what they need to do today, but then also how they build, connect, and deploy their devices to make sure they're achieving their outcomes as successfully as possible over the lifetime of their project. Jim, over to you.
Hi, so I'm the founder of Connex, along with a couple of other people. We've sort of examined where computing is going and secure connection to cloud services. Cloud services are really the thing that I'm most excited about, and I think the thing that people least understand in how to connect to them in one respect, still using the simple computing methodology of Steve Jobs from 20 odd years ago. So it's really about updating that process. So prior to this, I started another company which eventually landed a banking license, and we were very strongly interested in process and security. So the two things marry up really. For me, it's a natural progression and something new to explore.
Sure. Thanks, guys. So Jim, I don't know if you could tell us a little bit about how you guys got to this point. What are the big challenges you're looking to solve, and what was the kind of trigger for the idea in the first place?
Okay, so the idea started off with children, believe it or not, of different age groups ranging from 12 to 22. I'm lucky or unlucky enough to be surrounded by children of that age and their friends. And we started talking about their gaming experiences and the frustrations they have. And believe it or not, they get very frustrated with what they call hacking, and they get very frustrated with the performance issues. And what's apparent is that age group have a much greater understanding of what's available in the cloud as far as your services, but also the processes. So they're aware of that you can build a gaming computer in the cloud, really, and they're aware of how you do that, and the as a service methodologies, where the next generation are completely removed from those processes and don't really understand them. They're still working along the lines of, well, you download this to my computer, and that's what we work on now, and this is where we solve the processing and the memory issues. So there was a disconnect, a generational disconnect, and I thought, well, that's an interesting place to start looking. And I'm lucky enough to have friends that are physicists and mathematicians, etc., who have experience in this area. And I sort of dragged them together and said, right, let's start exploring this. Let's start exploring what cloud's got to offer, what connectivity options are there, and where the problems lie, in essence. And that was our starting point.
Yeah, and when you look at that sort of problem statement, when you start to say how do you solve those issues, what was what's the core solution that Connex have come up with, building out that, and what are the the main value adds that you are selling into your value chain?
Okay, so very simply, without going through a whole list of features and benefits, which no one wants to hear, it's an incredibly complex thing to do. If you boil it down simply, how I put it is, I want to sit you, the user, in the cloud. I want to be so close to the cloud that all those services are available to you safely and at the absolute premium performance level. And when I'm talking premium performance level, it's things like if you use Oculus as an example, the software behind Oculus is incredibly good, and the cloud provision is incredibly good. But they need to build in a computer into the front of that in order to process it to give you that level of performance. And it shouldn't need to be there. And the reason it's there is because connectivity is so poor. So when you come back a step, you start looking at the device itself, what don't we need to include, the connectivity to the cloud, and then there was this whole relationship between cloud and internet, and what's important and what's not important, and what is important is the platform, the cloud. So if we use Microsoft as an example, Microsoft's cloud's got every service you can imagine under the sun.
Sure.
You don't need the internet, so the idea is to pipe into that cloud and to force everything you need through those services in that cloud station. So you're bringing together three key tenets of connecting to service, and you're bringing them into one silo, and that's basically what Connex does. And by doing that, you remove the gaps between the tenants. So when you remove the gap between the computer and the Wi-Fi that's the other side of the house or the office, and you remove the gap from the Wi-Fi then to the cloud services, and you bring that together into one silo, then you solve an awful lot of security issues.
Yeah. So your idea of hell is having a user downloading all of the data onto their tablet, taking it home, working remotely in their own environment with all the data on that local device, and then having to re-upload it later on. The user experience is absolutely awful. The data is potentially outside its secure domain where it should live. And by bringing those things as close to as possible, you're allowing that user to view, manage, manipulate all of the data, but in a very regulated and secure fashion, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is it in a nutshell. Performance-wise, I think we're all used to this kind of format now for work and everything else. And this will continue, and it will only head forward as we start heading into the metaverse, etc. So, performance-wise, what people don't understand, because you have to remember, 95% people haven't got technical ability. So let's start with that as a starting point. People don't understand what's safe, what's not safe. They don't understand why performance is poor and why performance is good. You get the 5%, I've got a job at Cisco or I've got a job at Microsoft. I know how this works. And if I don't, I know an engineer that does. The majority of people aren't in that lucky situation. So, in simple terms, your upload and download speeds are not balanced with your Wi-Fi in your office or your home Wi-Fi. This creates an imbalance in conversation, because when you think you're standing next to someone and talking at the same speed and everything is working as it should be, when you're putting that into a computer or an interface ideal, suddenly that's imbalanced, and that creates performance issues. And the more people you add to that, or the more distance you put between those interfaces, then the more problems you have with performance. And I have to tell you, if you're fed up with performance, however non-technical you are, you don't want to do it. When you hear people go, oh, my job is talking to the US, and I have to do 8 meetings a day, and I have to do that 5 days a week, but I get fed up with it. I wish there was less meetings. I wish we were back to sitting on a plane again. Or you start wishing for what you had before when the performance is. So it's a key, as much as security is important, the performance element also, it's a key thing that we can look at.
Yeah. So looking at the sort of the solution, and if you're trying to minimize all the different values, all the different elements in that product, in that integrated product, you're trying to minimize the attack vectors. But to me, it sounds like there's still the device, there's still an element of connectivity, and then cloud. Is it as simple as that? Are those the three main vectors that you try and to position yourselves around to fix issues in, or do you see something else in there, maybe including the actual data itself?
See, I can drag you into this now.
I know that.
The data should be in the cloud.
Exactly.
The AI capability should be in the cloud. Everything you can imagine that is what we would call heavy lifting should be in the cloud. So if you can actually integrate your connectivity piece into your interface or device, your desktop device, and you can balance that, as I said about balancing the speeds, and you can add that front end security, which I don't want to talk about too much, because we can do something quite sophisticated now that hasn't been done before. If you can do that, so you've got that constant trust that that person is the right person constantly throughout their time with the device, then you only have one issue, and the issue is connecting those two tenants to the cloud, and that middle piece really is you guys. It's that the IoT piece, and it's critical to have that secure connected tissue, which is what you provide.
So when you look at your target customers, I know you said you come from a financial background, from your previous company. These are very heavily regulated companies, and they're looking at extending. Well, sorry, in the last 2 years, they have extended their network to include the work from home environment. So people are connecting in on their Wi-Fi at home. They might even be using home devices to access specific, their Office 365, everything to do with that model. When you're in that mode, it was accelerated very quickly. It was an overnight decision for everyone to work from home. Looking forwards with people, as you say, not returning back into that normal, they're going to work from home remotely. How are the security teams, the operational teams, the IT teams looking at projects and devices that are, simplifying that, but allowing them to retain their governance of data, governance of the security, and how are they managing these devices? Because an IoT device is very different from a laptop with a full master data management system running Windows, everything like that. Very, very different beasts. So how do you see them treating these devices on their network?
With blinkers on at the moment.
Yeah.
I think if you were to talk to some of the major banks now, they would tell you things like, "Oh, we sent out laptops to everyone so they could work at home. We restricted access so they could only work on specifics." And the issue we have is performance. Now people are demanding better performance device. That's not the issue. Let's be honest, that's the issue they're focusing on, because the techies like better performance things. You give them a watch, they want a better watch. It's from the security point of view, if you look at the facts and figures, 95% of secure issues are caused by your workers. Not the security man in his head office silo, but the people out on the ground in their own homes. However much you restrict that access, people do the craziest things. And your option is singular. Your option is training. And you say, oh, well, a lot of companies and a lot of government departments will say, oh, well, we do the training every 3 months, and people have to come, they do a tick box thing to make sure they understand it at the end of it. They take no notice whatsoever of that training, right? That is part of their core job. And if you question them about security, they will tell you straight away someone else does that, right? So you have an important mid to senior level manager that's working from home, that has a certain amount of access, who is also not a stupid person, whether or not they're technologically tuned in. They're not stupid. What they do know is I can ask someone how to unclick a box here, how to make it so I can send a personal email, how to make it so I can actually copy some of this and send it to another person, how to, right, okay, that information isn't available here, but, if I pick up that 2 terabyte mobile station from work and take it home and plug it into the back of my work's computer. That should be fine. You know, if I unplug the work's VPN, I've still got connectivity from my house Wi-Fi, and then I can go off and do something else.
Yeah.
People will find a way. People will not. I mean, trying to educate people to be the security person is ridiculous. You're employing that person because they manage a certain aspect of your business.
Yeah,
why,
of course.
why do you want to train them to be security experts? Because the only time they're going to get to the level where they understand not to do the naughty things is if you're training them to that level. And if you're training them to that level, you're taking away the reason for employing them in the first place. So that has to be solved outside of training. That has to be solved, you know, again, it's a key part of Connex. You know, you want a device that is, you know, I use the word idiot proof and I keep told, I get told not to use it. But to be honest, you want a device where it doesn't matter who you are, you cannot mess it up. You plug it in, it works, it's high performance, it does what it's supposed to do, I can do my job, but there's nothing I can do to mess that operational structure up.
Yeah.
That's key to how this goes forward, I think. And no one's got there yet.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you'll find that integrated hardware that allows it to connect seamlessly through to the cloud is very key. And one thing you look at is, you know, organizations will want to understand the identity and the access of that device through to the cloud, through to their infrastructure. So they'll be interested in saying, like, this device has this identity, this certificate, this is who it is, this is the firmware it's running, this is how I manage it, this is how I understand the device is not compromised as well. And they'll look at those in terms of a, you know, a security analytics package, and then they'll combine that with connectivity to say, like, okay, looks like the devices are sending the right data, connecting at the right time, they're not communicating to Facebook, they're only communicating to the cloud, so they get a good understanding of devices that, you know, are working effectively and not compromised. But then you combine that with the human factor, where there's actually the identity of the user logging in through that channel as well. It can become quite a large web of mess, right? That can really cause issues for the end operative in the security side, or the IT team, who are looking to literally, as you say, do their job as a security professional, and let anyone else who's, whether it's in an operational role, a marketing role, a sales role, a finance role, be able to go through all of their own day-to-day jobs and not actually have to worry about that. Combining those two things, allowing that to have a really secure end device that allows secure access for the user, then allows you to really focus on that, as you say, data integrity and the secure data. So if those devices are only viewing the data and they're only accessing the small components that they need, data integrity remains at the cloud and remains where all the compute power, where all the storage power is, and allows the organization to maintain that integrity. But what do you think happens when those devices start scaling from, you know, 10 devices that are connected for a bunch of executives to 50 to 100 to 50,000 to someone like Santander saying it's a global work from home situation, here's your hardware? What happens in the level of scale in terms of security when you get to those high level of numbers? That's
the beauty of cloud.
Yeah.
That's what cloud does. I mean, when you need to scale something up, it will do it for you. The tricky bit is integrating, as you say, the idea of zero trust is this constant checking that you are who you are and where you are and all the rest of it. And you can do it in all sorts of awkward, clunky ways. But if you can solve that and you can integrate that into what cloud services are already doing. Honestly, just Google what cloud services are doing, and you'll see.
I know. It's more for
they'll come up like we've got 30 secure processes already running. Which ones do you want to plug into and take as a service? I mean, those things already run there. They're very effective. People don't use them as much as they should use them, and but you can harden those, because if you can integrate those into something at the front end and follow the métier, really. The first time I ever heard this was a professor when we were speaking about security with mobile payments.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you could really definitively solve location and person
Mm-hmm.
in constantly, there was no way of destroying the integrity of that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've scored, then you win. If people could do that, then you win. And you know, it's a very difficult thing to do. People try and do it, Google Maps and all the rest of it, but none of these things are precise.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can solve that definitively, and you can link that to the secure processes that are already in the cloud, you've nailed that key problem. And with Connex, we believe that's what we've done.
Right.
It sounds like so we've obviously talked about you know, the security benefits for an organization here, and you were talking about performance earlier, but from a technical perspective, it sounds like though you're removing a lot of burden from, you know, the end user, that employee. They don't have that stress of, hey, can I pick up this particular application, or where do I get this data from, or whatever. It sounds like for an organization there's actually a pretty significant, you know, employee experience benefit here, a productivity benefit here. Is that fair to say?
I think this is a big an experience leap as a typewriter to the first computer.
Wow.
I think, but also it's a psychological leap. You have to get people into thinking, right, that's the right thing to do. That's where I see this. I think enough has changed in the world of technology for people really just to, like we like to do, which is rip up the rule book and get the physics boys in and say, right, okay, if in an ideal world, starting from scratch, what would we do with this?
Yeah.
And that's what we've come up with.
You can look at something like Sage, you know, an accounting product that used to be installed on someone's laptop or server sitting in a room somewhere. You know, it would get turned on once a month to start running all the billing and everything out the side of it, and that world to be changed by, you know, QuickBooks, you know, Sage moving online onto the cloud, or Adobe NetSuite, for instance, where they're absolutely trying to make sure everyone's financial information is in the cloud, stored there, processed there, understood locally. That's again one of those, you know, movements that's changed and ripped up the rule book of it.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Xero. I can remember being, like, I've been in small business all my life, so I can remember going down to the local PC world and buying the bit of software, and do we get Sage this time, or do we the latest one that's coming up that everyone says, well, you know, you buy this and we'll give you a voucher for something else, and you go, all right, I'll try that. And they all worked in pretty much the same way, but you brought them home, and as you say, you installed it on your computer, and although you had some sort of connectivity to something else somewhere that sort of updated things and you know, answered a few queries, it was all done locally by you, and all those processes were done by you, whether you understood them or not. And very often you didn't understand them, and you'd have to send that along with a load of paper to your accountant to work out. But the brilliance of Xero was it simplified all those processes, stuck it in the cloud, and is scalable. You know, you can take what you want when you want, and it's cheap and simple. And yeah, what's happened in cloud computing, what's happened in the internet as a whole, people aren't seeing it yet. You know, the whole idea of these virtual reality worlds, they are going to happen. You know, whether you believe it or not, where you get VCs sitting there going, this isn't going to happen, it's a fad, it's ridiculous. You get other VCs that want to chuck $1 billion at it. Of course. It's happening, and it's happening for the obvious reason that performance is improving. What you can do in a virtualized environment is, people aren't even talking about it yet, but it's the freedom of education, it's the freedom of work environment, it's the freedom of connection within work, and it simplifies everything, and it makes selling things, here you go, it is a reason it's really going to happen, it makes selling things easy, and it combines selling things with new devices, such as you know, NFTs.
Yeah. So
I was talking to someone about the blockchain the other day and how Web3 was going to sort of take off, and I was like, you know, I'm no expert, I've never been trained in this stuff, and this guy was absolutely obsessive about it, and I'm saying, well, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you're talking about the blockchain like it's something new that's just landed on our laps. You know, this is This is ledgers. This stuff. This has been going on since the time since people were building pyramids. It's not high tech. What's high tech is the secure nodes that you've got that all have to tick a box in order for something to happen and not be and to basically guarantee its integrity. And then you can't do that because even the top ones, when they have a big mistake, they go back and they erase it. So when they say it's not erasable, yes, it is. And it's basically saying there is a centralized power still in play. Where I think ledgers become exciting is in a closed loop environment. So where it's most exciting is if that Web3 wasn't an entire web process, but actually only existed in Microsoft's cloud, and another one only existed in AWS's cloud, and the two could communicate, then all of a sudden you have a process where things are much more secure. NFTs can exist in whichever world and move around, and it's all fine. And I think the internet's going to change. People have to understand these clouds are cityscapes. They own everything. They have bought everything. If I'm creating software today, I am not launching it on the internet as a whole and trying to gather up millions of customers. I'm partnering with Microsoft to do.
Do you think there's that too big to fail mantra where you've got so many big companies? We look at you said finance sector, oil and gas, industrial, loads of different sectors who are going cloud, as you say, for a lot of their data, a lot of their operational capabilities. And then you have companies like you say, like Facebook, are investing heavily in metaverse to start creating connected worlds that allow people to log in and actually interact with their data, their colleagues, everything around that. It may be data that's generated from a finance system or data that's been coming in from IoT devices that's all getting put into some sort of new output. Is it not scary that it's just Google Cloud, Amazon, and Microsoft, three big players who are already the three biggest, tech companies there?
It's not scary. Again, this is all like people get into this sort of conspiracy methodology.
No, sorry. I mean scary for the enterprise to say, okay, we're just going down the same route as everyone else. Is that not? Like a good old example years ago was Walmart did not want to use Amazon for any of their cloud capabilities because Amazon was going to move into their territory and compete with them. So is there any way that the cloud world and the players and the movements that they have are too big and too
oh no, even the cloud world itself has to reevaluate what it's doing. Every process reevaluates what it's doing. Yes, people still want to walk into Walmart, but Walmart are ahead of everybody else in the fact that they've created 20 virtual people they've created of different sizes and shapes for you to actually try clothes on from your home, and you can order them and they will deliver them out to you, and it gives it a better chance that you're not going to be ordering 4 different sizes and sending 3 of them back, which is the huge cost issue. So Walmart are adapting, but look at what happens if you logically think it out. If you've got a virtual world, how does Amazon work? Where are you going to sell your product? I'm a salesman. If I'm selling product, am I going to go to Amazon? Am I going to go to a virtual world where the majority of my product could be an NFT possibility as well, and have a virtual contract in the virtual space, but also I could send out the real version to someone's house. I can build my own shop. I can adapt that, and I can invite people from all over the planet to it. Is Amazon, the way Amazon works now as a shopping facility, is that going to work in a virtual world? No, it's not. So Amazon is actually killing itself and wants to be working as fast as Mark Zuckerberg is on virtual worlds, because that's where people are going to buy things next.
So when you look at virtual worlds, bringing information from the physical world into that, using IoT devices like what you guys are building, or any of our Pelion's loads of different types of customers, what what do you think organizations should be thinking about next in terms of building their connected solution? They're obviously thinking transactionally, get data from A to B in the cloud. Is that enough for them to be thinking short-term, 12-month, 18-month products, or should they be thinking longer term in terms of what the cloud players are doing, what that data looks like, and what they should be implementing to have this, product that's better positioned in the future?
I think they have to have a degree of realism. So they have to realize that if you're going to start shifting data around, there's going to be a cost impact. At the moment, because this kind of shift is it's not new, people have been doing it for a while, but I mean, it's new in the fact that the amount of people now shifting in this direction. The cost of that is still very expensive, but that will come down. But you've got to balance that with all of the cost benefits, and I don't think they're really looked at properly. I mean, even it was one of the latter stages of our process was we brought in a senior guy who'd left Cisco, and his understanding of the cost around that, the data transfer and how you organize that and the process behind that, and what you could cut out within the system and how it balanced. That understanding for us really helped us because, on the face of it, when you look at the cost of shifting all this data around, you just go, no, it's too expensive, we're not going to do it. But if you understand the argument, you go, actually, at the moment, that cost balance is out. And I know in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, as more people do this, that cost is just going to reduce. That's the only real stumbling block at the moment, and I think if people are logical about it, it's not a stumbling block. But the shift to cloud is going to happen at rocket speed. I mean, you're going to be. We're now on that precipice where the rocket's going to take off because the big tests have happened. Bank of America, they did it. Every other bank on the planet looks at that and goes, right, okay, they've done it, we can do it. And you start, these shifts are going to happen very, very quickly. The shift to metaverse is going to be slower. Only not because these things haven't existed, because they have. Second Life has existed for a long time. It's a successful thing. Linden Labs, it's got its own currency. It plays out. It's got its own economy. And you've got a lot of the things like Fortnite is in that sort of area, and there's various other ones there. And people are starting to integrate it. So I think it was Fortnite didn't have a concert that was open to everyone with Ariana Grande. And, these things are starting to happen. People are starting to sort of take the physical into the meta, and that's going to continue. But that story is going to take a bit longer.
Yeah, of course. I think it's generational, right? I think even for my generation, I'm a bit like, what's going to happen? I'm not really want to sit and go into the metaverse, but then generations below, and then below that, and then I look at my younger kids who are consistently wanting to play in the Oculus because they think it's the coolest thing ever, right? So it's generational impact that they'll see. The change in technology will drive through into it. So I think going through those different generations, we've talked about metaverse, we've talked about shifting to cloud. What do you think are other massive technical trends that are coming? Maybe not even technology, even just social trends as well that will drive that space and how people operate, or space at how devices connect and communicate through to the cloud as well. A big question, but then also how do you think organizations can make sure they're looking at it? You can quite quickly go Google Gartner hype cloud and you'll come up with all the big trends that are there, but from your perspective, what are the important ones?
Well, we've hit upon the two big ones, really, performance and security, but I think there's going to be huge shifts in connectivity and the need for continual on, especially in industry, and that whole job market is going to change. That only changes when you have perfection of connection to a certain extent, and that requires the idea of if something falls over or something is dropping in performance in the background, that you'll flick onto something else that isn't, and there is no, for the user, there is no, I can't see any difference. That continues. That's the idea that these things are balanced automatically without any fancy equipment, and very simple for the user to not have to understand that the performance is there for them. And that's when you start looking at what's available, and you also have to look at the environment. Whose idea was it to dig up roads right across the planet to chuck fibre in? You know, really, did you not just get people in a room first of all to talk about this and decide whether or not this was this was a really clever idea? Yeah. Because it's not, for a number of reasons, not simply because you'd be driving up the road and someone's put a traffic lights up, but you know, environmentally, it's not a sound thing to do. So why would you do it? You know, those infrastructures are in place, so we're not going to complain too much. But those infrastructures will never be in place in certain countries. They will just miss that step. What they're looking at is things like Starlink. Well, Starlink's quite interesting, and I think it is an option for many countries, especially where there is large areas of nothing. But it's unbalanced. It's capable of being hit by a meteor storm. You know, didn't 40 satellites or something get knocked out in one hit at one point? You know that, and you know, where's the fallback? So really, I see Starlink as a second, third world option. I don't see it as a first world or a machine ready option. So we're back to looking at Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi 6 is coming along. That all looks exciting, and you're looking at 5G, 6G, 5G mmWave. 5G mmWave is the thing that really excited me. To be honest with you, it's got a few problems, and they can be solved like anything else. But I think the idea of shifting, communicating to your data via telecoms is the way to go, and that to me is the obvious route. But that has to be backed up by the fact that if you've got 21 providers, you know, you have to have open access to all of them. And if one stand falls down, another one takes over it, and you have that consistency of connection. The integrity of that is important.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, 5G is one of those points where, in theory, it can expand out to have 1 million devices connected in a square kilometre, right, from one cell tower. What happens if the cell tower falls over? What happens if there's something really bad happens, terrorist attack? Can those devices rightfully connect to the competitor's cell tower to have continuous service? And you get roaming is the way it's done at the moment, or is it using something like EUICC, where the device can change from one network operator to the other very fast to have that continued service? You know, that gives that high level of SLA. Because I think at the moment you've got, as you said, cellular or Starlink or any sort of connectivity technology is about coverage. Where is it? 99% of cellular coverage is where the people are. So what are the use cases where, as you say, it's out in the desert or it's in the middle of nowhere, it's a third world country, and you really got to look at, say, well, what are the alternative technologies, and then how do you bleed them together to just allow customers to have a connected solution? And they don't care. Is it 5G? Is it satellite? Is it Wi-Fi? They don't care, right? They want it, just the end user wants a thing that will work. And I think that mantra is what most of the connectivity market will be pushing towards over the next 5 to 10 years.
That's the sort of the end point, the conclusion we came to with our journey was device didn't matter. And a lot of the things we talk about, they're nothing new. You know, you have tablets that are connected to 5G, but it's the performance level of those. So the thing that people don't understand so much is they go, I've got a phone that does that. Yeah, it's not very good over here, but well, yeah, but that's because of the chipsets, the receiver, the aerial, there's a lot of variables involved. It's not just 5G, you know, it's not just, exactly. It's like, I've got Lego with 1,000 bits over here. I can build all sorts of fancy things, and you've got Lego as well. That's great, but you've just got the blocks, so you can just build a wall. There's a difference. So, and I think people don't really get that, the sort of technical difference between the two things. Yeah, so the conclusion we got to was device. Ultimately, device doesn't matter. When I think it was Steve Jobs that said people fall in love with these things. So, you know, it looks like it's got a smiley face. It looks human. You know, it may have been the case then, but that's when you just wanted to see a flashing box on a screen and you could type what and it came up, and that was pretty fantastic. But now we are in love with the services, and that's where we got to. It's the service you love, and if that service is premium, and if that service is giving you everything it wants, it doesn't matter what the device is. The device could be a mirror, it could be your fish tank, it could be anything, provided the connectivity, the security, and the performance are absolutely premium, and that's where we got to.
Yeah, and if I'm an organization thinking about some of these really, you know, big picture transitions that we're talking about here, you know, move to, you know, always on, always connected, everything into the cloud, metaverse even, what are the sort of big pitfalls that they should be thinking about, and how do they avoid them? How do they avoid, you know, the scenario you described of, you know, digging up roads unnecessarily type of thing? How should they be thinking about that, and what are the big things they can avoid? Question to both of you, I guess.
Go on then, Niall.
Tricky one.
I think big things to have. So looking at sort of carbon neutral, reduction in energy, reduction in carbon footprint from enterprises is also something that's very, very key. So I think when people are taking big transformation projects or adopting new technologies, looking at you know, new initiatives or deploying new products and services, I do believe quite a lot of the world will start thinking about this in an energy footprint as well. How are these devices behaving? How much effort is being utilized to create them, and then the impact of the devices and the services into the market. So I think looking at it, people will balance the investment against heavily into technology, but then if it reduces their energy footprint even further, I think you'll find the investment gets accelerated beyond that. I think also people really need to balance what they do today versus what they want their business or their service to be in 10 years, and that's something that a lot of companies can be really fall short on. They really look at how do I get myself out of the immediate hole that I'm in 6 months, whether or not it's meeting my, you know, my profitability, my targets, my report, versus where I want my business to change towards. And I think Microsoft is probably one of the greatest companies to reinvent itself from on hardware and operating systems to basically this massive services organization as a software business. And that wasn't done by short-term decisions. That was done by, you know, Satya Nadella coming in and actually changing the strategy long-term for that business. So I do think there's a balance of short-term and long-term, and companies will really start to take in the external factors, you know, is like the environment as well.
Jeez, you answered it all. You're about Microsoft. It's a new business, completely new business.
Yeah.
The idea of adopting cloud services and everything has to be put to Bulmer, who everyone thought was a lunatic. But, you know, no one listened to him, but it was the right idea. And then they did adapt when the next guy came in. But not only that, I think materials are quite important. Another thing we did when we were going through our process is we've got someone who's pretty whizzy at design. And we're saying, oh, just build it like this and use this, do that, and do what everyone else is doing, but we'll make it look a bit more, you know, a little bit more Tesla, for want of a better phrase. But and their first thought was, again, it's a generational thing. Their first thought was, what materials can we use that will biodegrade?
Right.
And what can we do when we're talking about 3 different units? Why can't we just have one premium unit, and we have parts of that unit can be added and subtracted, and you have a sort of a versatile unit that has a longer shelf life. But then, because there is no fear of, and here's the biggest problem with the computer now, it doesn't matter how much someone's told me they've just cleaned my memory, I want to smash it up with a sledgehammer rather than give it to someone else to use.
Yeah.
Because that's how we feel about it. We feel about, that's held all my private stuff. It's the same with the phone. You know, what do you want to do with the phone? Do you want to hand it over to someone else and say it's been wiped? You kind of look at it and go, not so sure. I'd rather smash it with a sledgehammer or chuck it into landfill, and that's ultimately where they end up. And I think the beauty of Connex is there isn't anything on there that you feel is something you need to worry about. So it is ultimately a very good device at the end of its lifetime, can be moved on to the next person, or to a school, to a hospital, to wherever it's going to be useful. And I think we're building that into the very fabric of the company.
Good.
So from the ground up, and I think again that's why new companies spring up all the time. And when you were on about cloud before, something we didn't hit back at was that you get these 5 or 6 big companies and they own everything, and it's scary for everyone. It's no different to the Wild West in my mind, is how I describe it. Is everyone's running around and sticking their flags in the ground and going, this bit's mine, and then eventually everything. The big cities pop up and you go, oh, there's 5 huge cities, everyone's migrating to the big cities. But years later, there's another 30 cities have popped up.
Yeah.
They just keep happening. So people like Microsoft don't go, I've got X percentage of the cloud business, this is going to be mine forever, because it's not, because the thing keeps moving.
Yep, perfect.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, thank you both for your time, of course. Before we close out, very quickly, Jim, if people want to follow up with you, carry on the conversation, where can they find you?
The easiest place is LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there, so Jim Goodman is pretty easy to find. Or Jim at bbi.com is the or bbimagination.com, I believe it is the way to get me via email.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. And you can find us, myself and Neil, at Pelion IoT on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, all the usual channels. So yeah, please pick up the conversation. If you want to come on and have a chat with us as well, we're obviously happy to do that too. But Jim, thank you so much for your time. Neil, likewise, thanks for your time. Great conversation today, and I look forward to talking to you both again soon. So yeah, thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Cheers.